I love cut content. Having a look at content that was left out in the final game is always an interesting insight into the development history for any game, and sometimes I wonder what the final game would look like if these features were never cut. You know what I also love? Garry's mod. Which is why I'm surprised that no one has ever done a deep dive into the cut content for this game. You might be thinking, Andy, you do know this game is 90% user create add-ons, right? And you're correct, for modern Gmod anyways. See, before the workshop, and even before modding became prevalent, Garry experimented with adding content to the game that would eventually be removed in later versions. In early Gmod, and especially version 9, the game was aiming to be more feature-packed before Garry went, let the community have their fun, I guess. So today, we're gonna go back in time and look at the officially added content that was ultimately removed from later versions of Gmod. From cut models, to cut maps, to even entire cut game modes. It might not seem obvious, but trust me, there is a lot. Now, before we begin, I am fully aware that you can experience most of the cut content in modern Gmod thanks to the Steam Workshop. In the description below, I've created a collection that compiles pretty much every add-on that restores all the cut models, maps, and game modes for modern Gmod, so be sure to check it out if you're interested. Alright, with that out of the way, let's begin by talking about the one Gmod map that everyone knows. GM Construct was Gmod's first ever map, so obviously it went through many changes during its lifespan. We'd be here all day if I were to go over every little change that was made, so we're briefly gonna go over what's different and focus more of our attention on the areas that were removed, which sounds easy. All we have to do is boot up the first version of Construct and we... My eyes. So this is the first ever version of Construct, and wow, what an eyesore this is. The entire map is just a solid white texture, and if it weren't for these black lines that outline the halls, you would have no idea where you were going. According to the readme of Gmod version 3, this early iteration of Construct was rushed. I can only guess a lot of people complained about it because just a few hours later, Garry would release an update to Gmod version 3 that gives Construct its now iconic textures. The two things I find noteworthy about this version of Construct is when you spawn in, you'll be standing near a spawning pad and a hallway that can load you into different chapters of Half-Life 2. The hallway is rather simple. If you press E on a certain chapter icon, you'll load right into that chapter. It's kind of broken here, but I imagine it worked flawlessly back then. This hallway stuck around until it was removed in version 8 of Gmod. Tragic, but oh well. The real interesting feature though would have to be this spawning pad. See, before the spawn menu was a thing, Gmod 3 and 4 relied on this pad that allowed you to spawn in various ragdolls and props. Heck, in version 4, Garry added a second spawning pad that allowed you to spawn in blocks of various shapes. Even when the main spawning pad was removed in version 5 due to the spawn menu, this secondary spawning pad actually stuck around until its removal in version 9. Anyways, in version 4, the map featured an already spawned in airboat and buggy because, well, back then, you weren't able to spawn them in. Strangely enough, even when Garry added the ability to spawn in vehicles, the airboats and buggies stayed around until version 10. I don't know why Garry kept them around for so long, but whatever. In version 5, not only do we get Gary's first attempt at a skybox, which looked really ugly, but we also get our first look at the pond, which looked more like a pool back then. In version 6, the pond was fully fleshed out. However, I think the most interesting part that was removed in later versions would have to be this little island in the middle. This little sand island serves no purpose, but I don't know, it's kind of nice to just chill on here while surrounded by water. The island stuck around until version 10, and it's kind of upsetting that it was cut, but I can see why. The pond, while not big by any means, was a nice way to build boats and whatnot, so having this little island block the way, I imagine was quite the headache. Also in version 6, we get the introduction of the hangar, which had the dark room, and that's it. In version 7 though, not only do we get the now iconic white room, but also a black room. The yin and yang, basically. In version 11, both would be replaced with the white colorable room we know today. However, I think the funniest addition to the hangar would come in at version 10. In between the white and black rooms, Garry would add a room that contains various colorful lights, and that's it. All I gotta ask is, why? Unless you want to have a party in here or something, no one is gonna use this room. It's pointless. Yeah, unsurprisingly, this room would get removed one version later. In version 11 and 12, there is a secret room that was added underneath the stairs near the garage. The room contains weirdly stretched textures and a sign that credits the people who helped make this version. The room was cut when Construct 13 was developed. Speaking of Construct 13, you would think this version is where this section ends, since it is the version we're on now, but nope. Before GMod 13, members of the community collaborated together to create the version of Construct we have today, with Garry overseeing the project. Every so often, the map devs would release a beta build to get feedback. It's the reason why you can find many early versions of Construct 13. I'll try to make this quick since there are so many different builds of Construct 13, but if you want to explore every version yourself, I'll leave a link to a archive.org page for the Construct 13 beta archive. Real quick though, while I was editing this, I actually found an even earlier build of Construct 13 that is not in the official archive. This one is weird. You know the water tower in Construct 12 that is in the skybox? Well, here it is in the actual map. This version of Construct 13 is the earliest I can find. However, I am pretty sure there are even earlier builds in this face punch thread right here. Problem is, I can't access it. So, if anyone is able to find even more builds of Construct 13 that are compiled before this date, then send it to me on Discord, because as it stands right now, this collection is incomplete. Anyways, in early March builds, when the tower was first added, there was actually a ladder that led all the way to the top. This, I'll be honest, should have never been cut. Not much really happens at the tower anyways, so having a ladder that would have taken you to different floors without no clip would have been nice. Also at the tower, if you broke the concrete here, you'll be led into a secret air duct that'll either take you to the dark room or this secret room. I also wish this wasn't cut. It wouldn't have been useful, but it would have made for a nice hiding spot. A few days later, we got our first look at probably the most iconic location in the Construct 13 beta. The tunnels. These tunnels extend to different parts of Construct. Not only do they lead you to areas like the garage, dark room, and secondary tower, but they also led you to rooms that were exclusive to these tunnels. The first one is this weird underground bunker that's connected to the mirror room, and the second one is this pool room that's connected to the pond. These tunnels actually stuck around the longest, going through several changes. They even experimented with giving the tunnels a more rocky, cave-like formation. However, by the end of June, the tunnels were outright removed. Apparently, the tunnels were cut due to the community finding them too unnecessary, and yeah, I get it. Look, while I do find these tunnels neat, they are kind of pointless. You can already get to every area without them, and the 2 areas that were exclusive to the tunnels aren't really noteworthy. So yeah, I do think cutting the tunnels was for the better, but hey, I appreciate the ambition. From here on out, the changes made were pretty minor. They experimented with adding neon lights to the mirror room, which looks cool but kind of distracting. They experimented with adding a door to the white room, which, yeah, while jarring, is a neat idea, and I kind of wish they went back on it. They experimented with making the skybox more detailed, which, while it looks nice, I prefer the skybox we have now. Sorry, but this is just way too many PNG mountains for my liking. They experimented with adding a Construct Incorporate sign on the hanger, which is a cute touch, but does sort of feel out of place. Yeah, the changes in the final months were very minimal, but that makes sense. The community at this point had a clear idea for what they wanted in Construct 13, so all that was really left was to polish up the map before the full release of GMod 13. And that's how we got the construct we have now. I am definitely skimming over some differences, but A, this is not a construct history video, and B, if I were to go over every difference, that would take up most of the video's runtime, so I'll just leave it there. If you're curious about flatgrass though, there honestly isn't much. At its core, flatgrass is a very simple map. It's a flat plane of grass, like what else do you want me to say? There are several versions of flatgrass, none of them too interesting, but there is one version that I find kind of noteworthy. See, flatgrass was first added in the beta version of GMod 10, and in this version, Garry experimented with adding a 3D skybox rather than a 2D one, and oh man. I appreciate the attempt here, but this looks kind of bad. The geometry looks unnatural. There are giant patches of grass that I think are supposed to be trees, and in certain sections, you can just see through the ground. Yeah, there's a reason why this version of flatgrass existed for a very short time, because after this, Garry would just flat out remove the skybox, leaving us with the now iconic classic flatgrass. The map would receive an overhaul in the beta of GMod 13 and would be updated a few more times till we settled on the current version we have today. So that's a brief history on the early versions of Construct and flatgrass. Again, it's not everything, but we gotta move on. While Construct and Flatgrass were the main 2 maps of Garry's mod, they weren't the only maps. In fact, during the lifespan of GMod 9, there were a total of 16 unique maps. So let's go through them, shall we? Now, all of these maps were made for a certain game mode or gimmick, not sandbox, so most of them are pretty bare bones. I will be briefly describing the game modes, but I'll be going into more detail in the next chapter of this video. GM Melon Race is a map made for Melon Racer, obviously. It's a rounded course where you take control of a melon and race around, trying to avoid obstacles and pitfalls. GM Melon Lockdown is also made for Melon Racer, though this one takes place on an edited version of Nova Prospect, and surprisingly it works flawlessly. GM Laser Dance contains only a pit and not much else, but the main gimmick of this map is the ability to propel yourself using the game mode's main weapon. GM 910 contains various props and 2 forts. Hey, wait a moment. The main goal of this map is to hoard as many props as possible, all while fending off the other team. GM football is... well, football or soccer. What else do you need me to say? GM Bird Poo takes place on a deserted island. You take control of either the humans or the birds, and if you take control of the birds, your main goal is to try and poo on the humans. What has my career come to? GM Graveyard takes place in a spooky graveyard. The map was made for zombie infestation, which I will be getting into more later, but think of it as zombie survival before zombie survival. Of course, we cannot forget about the hidden Easter egg on this map. GM Longsight is basically an arena map made for snipers. The sight lines are kind of oppressive, but there are some spots to take cover in, so there's that. GM Build Bridge and GM Build to the Top were both made for the game mode build. The main goal of both of these maps is to try to make it to the end before the other team, using only props that you can spawn and freeze. GM Build Fort Wars was also made for build, though this one is... obviously a fort war. You have to build a fort using only crates, and once the time is up, the glass separating the teams disappears and a team deathmatch begins. GM TPC Test takes place in an urban environment, however, the geometry here is very basic and there's only a few props here and there. Out of all the maps in this game, this one just feels unfinished. GM Birdman is a map where you try to construct a plane of some sort and fly out as far as you can. If you crash in the water, that's GG. GM Freeze is the most detailed map in this list, taking place in some sort of laboratory. This is basically a team deathmatch game mode with a quirk of players freezing. I think anyways. And lastly for the GMod 9 lineup, there is GM Hide and Seek Yard and GM Hide and Seek Outland. Obviously by the name, these are both hide and seek maps. Yard takes place in some weird, I think, train yard. There are several buildings you can enter, but beyond that, this map is kind of small. Outland takes place in... well, another yard of sorts, this time with a bunch of trees. Despite being bigger than Yard, somehow there are less hiding spots. However, and I'm gonna have to put a seizure warning here, skip to this timestamp if you want to avoid it. There are 2 rooms on this map that, for some reason or another, contain rapidly flashing lights. Good lord. I don't know what the intention of these rooms are, but if they were to help the hiders, then I would rather killbind than ever hide in these rooms. So that's every GMod 9 map, but we're not done with this section quite yet. There are other cut maps that were not exclusive to version 9. GM Game Mode Test is a simple dev textured map with multiple rooms made for testing game modes, hence the name. It was created in version 8.4 and was specifically made for the game mode Running Man. Again, don't worry, we'll get into that later. GMDM Test is another test map made for GMod 10. This was specifically made for the deathmatch game mode, with a lot of room for open fights. MR Test was meant for the revival of Melon Racer in GMod 11. Like the original map, it consists of a rounded course with obstacles that you need to avoid. DFA-B Hilltop, DFA Islands, and DFA RSII were all meant for the game mode Dogfight Arcade Assault. They're open scenic maps that are meant for open air battles. I think my favorite would have to be RSI, it just looks beautiful. ASC Vanilla is unique as the map was meant to be played in 2D. This one looks kind of weird, but once you see the game mode, it'll make sense. And finally, we have the sequel to Construct, GM Construct 2. This one is... weird. It was only shared by Garry once back in 2007, and no one bothered to archive it until I found a working download on some dodgy Russian website, although it is on the workshop now. Anyways, the best way to describe Construct 2 is bizarre. I think Garry was trying to make a version of Construct more suitable for 32 players, hence why the map is way bigger. The garage now contains a full-on interior, complete with multiple rooms, a second floor, and most interesting of all, breakable glass. The hangar is still there, however, it's lacking all the extra rooms. You can also go out into the skybox, I guess. You can tell this map is unfinished just by looking at the texture work and the completely random lighting. I think this is an interesting retake of Construct, however, it's kind of complicated. Sometimes less is more, which is probably the reason why Garry scrapped it. Well, that's every cut map I could find. There are likely more maps created by Garry, but unless he decides to share every map he's made for GMod, it's very likely we won't see them anytime soon. And now for probably the most lengthy part of this video, the cut game modes. Once again, GMod 9 contains the most cut game modes of any version, but to start off this list, we're gonna go back to version 8.4 of Garry's mod. The first ever game mode that Garry experimented with was a game mode called Running Man. The game mode consists of a team called Team Mossman, and one guy is randomly picked as the Running Man, whoever that is. The Running Man has 1000 HP and is way faster than everyone else. Team Mossman, meanwhile, has to band together and kill the Running Man as soon as possible. Whoever lands the killing blow will become the next Running Man, and then the cycle repeats. Okay, so imagine versus Saxton Hale, but Saxton Hale has a gun. That's this game mode. Now moving on to GMod 9, by far the most well-known game mode that was cut would have to be Melon Racer. In this game mode, you take control of a melon and race around a course. The first melon that reaches 10 laps will be the winner. Careful though, cause if you're going too fast and slam into a wall, your melon will break apart. It's a simple racing game mode, but it required some skill to pull off, especially if you're speedrunning. This game mode would actually be brought back in GMod 11, however, it was a lot slower, it only had 3 laps, and featured this baby compass? I don't know. Build is a game mode where you and your team compete against other teams in racing to the end via building. On top of the gravity gun and fizz gun, which has its primary disabled, players are given 3 unique weapons: prop gun, prop remover gun, and prop freezer. The prop remover and prop freezer are self-explanatory, and the prop gun spawns in crates. It's also supposed to spawn in barrels too, but that doesn't work for some reason. Anyways, you're tasked with getting to the end goal using these weapons, whether it's crossing a canyon or building high into the sky. Teamwork is highly encouraged in this game mode, which is why I am struggling so hard in this footage. The one map that is an outlier to this game mode is Fort Wars. You're still building with crates, but now it turns into a team deathmatch once the timer ends. You can also set down a spawn point too. When the round begins, the glass disappears, a roller mine spawns in the center, which is marked by a cat for some reason, and your team is tasked with grabbing the ball and holding onto it for as long as possible. If your team has the most points by the end, then you win. Laser Dance is a team deathmatch game mode, but with a twist. Your primary fire shoots out a powerful laser that can knock you backwards, and your secondary fire shoots out a steady stream of lasers that can heal teammates. This game mode focuses more on movement, with players being constantly constantly launched into the air. 9/10 is basically what it's like to be a Pokemon TCG scalper. You're tasked with grabbing as many props as you can and bringing them back to your base, hoarding them from the other team. If you're feeling extra cheeky, you can go over to the other team's base and steal props from them. The only weapons you're given to defend yourself is a gravity gun and a crowbar. Whoever has the most props by the end will be the winner. There were plans on bringing the game mode back in GMod 10, however, this ended up never happening. Also, fun fact, 9/10 originated from another mod made by Garry, which went under the same name. Longsight is a deathmatch game mode where the only weapons you have are sniper rifles and a single pistol. There are a total of 4 weapons. The bolt sniper shoots out a bolt, so basically a crossbow. The silent sniper is a sniper, but silenced. The smart sniper does something, and the secondary handgun is just a pistol. Not much to say on this one since it is a deathmatch game mode, but if you hate snipers, then this isn't for you. Zombie infestation is, like I said, zombie survival before zombie survival. Your goal is to try and survive against player-controlled zombies, and if you die, you also become a zombie. The humans are given a gravity gun, crowbar, SMG, and a shotgun. The zombies are only given a crowbar. Just a simple zombie infection game mode. Bird poo is... why is this a thing? Okay, so there are 2 teams, humans and birds. If you're on Team Bird, then your primary goal is to try and poo on the humans below. If you're a human, then your main goal is to try and kill that fucking bird that you hate. The humans are given a stun stick, pistol, revolver, and crossbow. Ignoring the fact that this game mode is obviously one-sided towards humans, why? Birdman is a game mode where you and your team are tasked with building a machine that can fly. Once the time is up, your team's contraption will be put to the test. Whichever machine flies the farthest will be the winner. Pretty simple. Football is... again, football, or soccer if you're American. However, I know this is American soccer because not only are you given a crowbar, but you're also given a pistol and a shotgun. If you become a goalie, you're also given a gravity gun, which allows you to throw the ball back. Anyways, yeah, you guys know how soccer works. I don't need to explain it. Tactical police cops is... I think Garry's attempt at recreating Counter-Strike. There are 2 teams, Team Liberation and Team Freedom. Those both mean the same thing. You're initially given a USP, but if you manage to get some kills, then you'll earn money to spend on weapons and upgrades. Just like 9/10, plans were made on bringing the game mode back in GMod 10, this time with an overhauled aiming system, but once again, this ended up never happening. Quake Freeze is a team deathmatch game mode, with the gimmick being that players will freeze when they die. I think. There's no description for this one, so yeah. I tried to find gameplay of this game mode, and the only upload I found is this YouTube video, and... wow. This feels like I'm watching a highly compressed GIF as a video. Ironically enough, this does give me a somewhat good idea on how this game mode works, but if I'm missing anything, let me know. And finally, hide and seek is... well, hide and seek, you guys know how hide and seek works, I don't need to explain it. However, you're given a catcher gun, so that's pretty cool. GMod 9 definitely has the most game modes out of every version, but GMod 10 and 12 do have some unique game modes. In GMod 10, there's Garry's Mod Deathmatch. This game mode is... chaotic. It's fast-paced and incredibly gory. You'll grab weapons from these item boxes, and on top of the vanilla weapons, there are some new weapons like a flamethrower or a Egon. Just looking at the gameplay footage, this game mode looked a lot of fun, which makes it all the more head-scratching when it was removed in later versions. Garry was apparently developing version 2 of this game mode, however, it was eventually cancelled. canceled. Sad. Now moving on to GMod 12, Dogfight Arcade Assault is good old plane combat in GMod. The game is essentially capture the flag, where you need to steal the enemy team's fuel and fly it back to your own base to power up your rocket. The first team that gets to 3 wins. You can also pick up various power-ups to help take down the enemy team. This game mode was added alongside Trouble in Terrace Town, although one was clearly given a lot more attention than the other. Prop Hunt was also officially in the game at one point, pretty much working how it does today. Not much to really add here, it's Prop Hunt. And finally, Ascension. This is a interesting one. It's a 2D game mode where you and a second person need to spawn in props and rearrange them to get to the very top. The game is split into teams, and whichever team reaches the very top wins. It's kind of similar to Build, except in 2D. I do appreciate the ambition, but I don't know, just from playing it, it's clunky. Anyways, that's pretty much every cut game mode I could find. GMod back then, and especially GMod 9, had tons of unique game modes, yet the only 2 game modes in the base game now is Sandbox and Trouble in Terrace Town, and that's honestly kind of a shame. Game modes like Deathmatch, 9/10, and especially Melon Racer would have fit in perfectly with the base roster. But oh well, at least we have the workshop now. And speaking of the workshop, back in 2010, Gmod didn't have that. If you wanted to download a add-on, you had to go to garrysmod.org, download the add-on you want to get, then navigate to your local files and extract it to your add-ons folder. This is trivial now, but back then, this was way too confusing for dumb idiot kids like me. So Garry had an idea. On July 29th, 2010, CloudScript, later known as Toybox, would be announced and added to Gmod. The Toybox is very similar to the Steam Workshop today. Players can upload their own creations on a separate website, whether it's a model, map, entity, whatever you can think of. It'll be uploaded to the cloud and then it will be easily accessible in-game via a separate tab. You can rate, favorite, and comment on uploads too. In fact, in some ways, this was kind of better than the workshop. With the workshop, if you want to install a add-on but are already in a game, you're gonna have to reload the map, unless you have this add-on. With the Toybox though, you just click on the icon and you're good to go. It's that simple. The Toybox, much like the Steam Workshop nowadays, offered a variety of add-ons to choose from, some of them being pretty iconic. If you were around during this era, I'm sure you remember such classics like the epic Volvozilla, or Dr. Hacks, or even Escape the Box. All of that and more in a single tab. However, when the Steam Workshop came out, Garry realized that having both the Toybox and the Workshop was kind of redundant. So, on the release of Gmod 13, Garry made the somewhat controversial decision to remove the Toybox. Not only that, but the website that hosted these add-ons was also shut down. Thankfully though, Garry has backed up every Toybox add-on, first being archived as a torrent on his site, then later re-uploaded on archive.org, which I will link in the description below. Do be warned though, the total file size is 36 gigabytes. You can kind of experience the Toybox today via 2 methods. The first method is using the Workshop add-on Cloudbox. Cloudbox is essentially a modernized version of the Toybox, featuring almost every add-on while also being actively maintained. If you want a more authentic experience though, then flatgrass.net has a guide on installing Gmod 12 and patching the game to work with a new Toybox website. Both of these are made possible thanks to Pancakes, so massive shoutouts to him. Anyways, yeah, while I am sad that the Toybox is now gone, it's understandable why this was removed. Now we're gonna go over the miscellaneous cut content that didn't really get their own segment. First up, there's a bunch of unique props that are only seen in GMod 9. These cut props include a bowling ball, bowling pin, skateboard, vinyl, axe, cricket bat, machete, laser pistol, arrow, basketball, and dart. These models were made by Mixerman 3D and Bucket Muncher, and like I said, these are only seen in GMod 9. I don't know why these were removed, considering they kind of fit in GMod, but whatever. Also, the mattress was replaced with Domokun for some reason, and I can only guess this is Garry trying to be cute or whatever. There's also a bunch of tools that were removed before GMod 13 for some reason or another. Turret spawns in a gun where upon the press of a keybind, it'll shoot. Very simple. The nail staples a crossbow bolt between two objects, so think of it as like a slightly different weld tool. Magnetize is supposed to pull in props together, although I couldn't get it working for some reason. An RT camera spawns in a camera that can render objects and players in real time without having to press a keybind to view it. Also, GMod 9 had the tool export to hammer, but that doesn't work. GMod has a variety of overlays, but one overlay that was left out in modern versions was morph. Morph is essentially the liquefy tool in Photoshop. Wherever you clicked and dragged, it would morph the image, and it will stay like that until you clear it. I'm trying to make G-Man do the uwu face. I don't think it's working. Oh, and before we move on to modern Gmod, I want to give a shout out to all the old backgrounds from earlier versions. All these backgrounds are iconic in their own ways, and it's kind of a shame they aren't still used today. At least you can still bring them back through add-ons, I guess. Now, as for current day Gmod, it honestly doesn't have much in terms of cut content, but you can still find some stuff hidden in the files. Before I continue though, massive shoutouts to the cutting room floor for all the info provided. The Annabelle and Alex gun were both planned to be spawnable weapons at one point, with them getting their own icons. These are both Half-Life 2 weapons that are only yielded by NPCs. You can still grab them in modern Gmod by killing an NPC, but they'll use the default Half-Life 2 models. Certain custom props have or had hidden text from the creator Max of S2D. The prop GM painting had text reading, "Man, there's a ton of wasted UV space in that corner. I wish I could get a use for it, but this is a silly painting prop that I didn't even warn Garry about. I think we'll have to live with these kilobytes of wasted texture memory. Max of S2D was here in your GMod 13, smiley face." Garry later replaced it with a QR code where upon scanning it would read, "Don't leave cheesy messages in a texture file everyone can see because you'll be really embarrassed when a wiki documents it. But hey, sometimes you gotta learn the hard way. Thanks for playing Gmod." The prop Hover Classic, used for the hover balls, had text reading, "Max is in your hover balls, smiley face. Oh baby." It was later replaced with a QR code that redirected to a Wikipedia article for spheres. And finally, Button 04 had text that simply read, "Max of S2D was here." This one was just simply removed. We all know about Construct's iconic ambience loop. But did you know that there's a nighttime variant that was never used? Take a listen. And finally, the last unused asset that is worth talking about is this pixelated American flag. Why does this look like that one low-quality American flag that Trump tweeted out? Now, this would have been used in the main menu whenever you selected your language. The very likely reason this went unused is because, well, the UK flag already sets your language to English, so having both would be kind of redundant. But I'm going with my alternative theory that Gary Newman hates all Americans. Gary, look, I know we don't get along, and I know we have many problems here like corrupt politicians, no free healthcare, and many mass shootings, but at least we don't eat beans on toast. And that's pretty much everything I want to talk about. Now, I know I didn't cover literally everything, but some of the cut content that didn't get featured are either some admittedly funny dev comments or textures like this piece of tape. Like, what do you want me to say? That being said, if I did miss anything major, which is very likely considering the amount of updates GMod went through, then let me know in the comments below. Thank you all for watching, take care, and as always, I will see you guys next time.